I never thought I'd become invisible in my own marriage. Not ignored, not neglected. Invisible. The kind of invisibility that creeps up on you slowly. The kind that wraps itself around your soul until one day you wake up and realize no one sees you anymore. Least of all the woman who once said she couldn't breathe without you. My name's Ethan Cole, 35, and I live in Chicago, though that hardly mattered for a long time. I spent most of my days in a cubicle 3 floors underground, working IT support for a mid-sized logistics firm, resetting passwords, fixing Wi-Fi issues, explaining for the 100th time that turning it off and back on again actually does solve a lot of problems. Meanwhile, my wife, Isabel Monroe, was scaling the corporate ladder like it was her birthright. She worked at an elite branding agency on Michigan Avenue called Gray & Baxter, the kind of place where the espresso machine costs more than my entire gaming setup. She was magnetic, sharp, the kind of woman who walked into a room and people actually turned to look. And once upon a time, I was proud to be the man on her arm. We met in college, me, the architecture major, with a dream of reimagining urban landscapes, and her, the marketing prodigy who could sell sand in a desert. Our love was fast, passionate, and dangerously idealistic. We used to stay up all night dreaming of the lives we'd build together, her campaigns, my blueprints, a shared office overlooking Lake Michigan. But dreams defer, and then they decay. When my father was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma during my final year, everything stopped. The tuition dried up and I left school 2 months before graduation to help with the bills. I told myself it was temporary. So did Isabel. That was 9 years ago. Somehow the temporary became permanent. I got a job in IT to support us while she pursued her goals, thinking I'd go back to school eventually. That eventually never came. Every year there was another reason. Her promotion to senior strategist, then creative director, then finally VP of brand innovation. Each rung she climbed became another excuse to keep me exactly where I was, static, invisible, useful. And the worst part? I let it happen. I can't even say Isabel was cruel, at least not in a way you could point to on paper. She didn't hit. She didn't yell. She just dismissed. With sighs. With rolled eyes. With subtle cuts wrapped in silk words. Like the time I showed her a sketch of a sustainable housing development I was doodling after dinner. She looked at it, smiled faintly and said, "That's cute, babe. You still think about that stuff?" That stuff. My life's passion reduced to a doodle. Cute. So when she got promoted, again, and invited me to her company's annual gala at the Crown Point Hotel, I told myself it would be different this time. I bought a new charcoal suit, tailored to fit, dropped more money on it than I'd spent on anything for myself in years. I practiced small talk. I read up on branding trends. I even rehearsed ways to bring up my old design work if someone asked what I did, just in case. She noticed me straightening my tie in the bathroom mirror and said, "Don't wear those Marvel cufflinks, okay? This is a classy event." I nodded, heart thudding, and left the cufflinks in the drawer. We arrived at the hotel just past 7. The place looked like it had been pulled from the pages of Architectural Digest, towering ceilings, glass chandeliers, and furniture I couldn't even guess the price of. Isabel's colleagues were already there, all dressed like they'd just stepped off a Vogue shoot. She introduced me to everyone like I was a +1, not her husband. "This is Ethan," she'd say. No last name, no mention of our years together. No hint that the reason she was even standing there with a title on her nameplate was because someone else had sacrificed everything in silence. At first, I smiled through it, laughed politely, played the part of the doting husband. I nodded at the jokes I didn't get, refilled her wine glass without being asked, and answered the same question a dozen times. "What do you do, Ethan?" "I work in IT support," I'd reply with a practiced smile, watching the glaze roll over their eyes before they politely changed the subject. But I kept my head high. Because tonight, I told myself, I belonged. Then came Jackson Whitmore, the CEO. Tall, charming, too tan for Chicago in April. Isabel's posture changed the second he approached, like her spine suddenly remembered its purpose. "Ah, Isabel," Jackson said, voice like butter. "Is this the mystery man behind the marketing magician?" She laughed a little too loudly. "This is Ethan, my husband. Don't let the quiet demeanor fool you. He's the real MVP at home." It was meant as a compliment, but it landed like a slap. The conversation shifted to a client campaign, something about immersive pop-ups in San Francisco. I had nothing to contribute, so I just stood there, nodding, clutching my club soda like it might save me from drowning in that sea of buzzwords and backhanded compliments. Then, out of nowhere, Isabel joked, "You know, Ethan still gets dizzy on escalators. Imagine putting him in one of those VR pods." Laughter. Light, airy, effortless. "And remember that camping trip last year?" she continued, eyes gleaming. "He brought a full memory foam mattress and an electric bug zapper. The man glamps, not camps." More laughter, then the kill shot. "Sometimes I swear I have 2 kids at home." Even Jackson chuckled, but he looked at me longer than the others. Not mockingly, just long. I stood there frozen, every cell in my body screaming to leave. But I smiled, nodded, and said nothing. Because I'd been trained to make myself small, not anymore. The drive home that night felt like eternity. Isabel didn't say much, just scrolled through her phone in the passenger seat while I kept my eyes locked on the road. I could still hear the laughter from the party echoing in my head, could still feel the burn in my chest every time she belittled me to entertain her CEO. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles whitening, jaw clenched so hard it ached. We didn't argue. That was Isabel's specialty, passive dominance. She didn't yell. She simply froze you out until you apologized for making her feel uncomfortable. And I had become an expert at folding first, but tonight something broke. When we got home, she walked in ahead of me, heels clicking on the hardwood like a judge entering a courtroom. She didn't even turn around when she said, "You were really quiet tonight." I stood in the doorway, coat still on. "You made me the joke, Isabel. Again." She turned then, blinking as if surprised I had a voice. "Oh, come on, Ethan. You're being sensitive. It was just a little fun. Everyone laughs at these events." "Yeah, everyone but the one being laughed at." She sighed and poured herself a glass of white wine, already switching into her end-of-day mode, the one where she became a different person, detached, unreachable. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is." "Is it?" I said, finally stepping inside. "Because from where I was standing it looked like you built your image by tearing me down in front of your entire company." She didn't respond, just sipped her wine and walked into the bedroom. I stared at the space she'd left behind, the silence she always used like a scalpel, precise, calculated, and cold. But this time, I didn't follow her. I went to my desk in the spare room, pulled open the bottom drawer and took out a sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. And for the first time in a long time, I started to draw. The next morning, Isabel acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for the office, even complimented my coffee like it wasn't made by the same pathetic child she mocked in front of her boss. But something had shifted, in me. I spent most of that Saturday sitting at the dining table surrounded by old notebooks, design mock-ups, and a dusty architecture textbook I hadn't cracked open in nearly a decade. The more I looked through my old work, the angrier I became. Not at Isabel, but at myself. I'd let it all go. I'd traded dreams for stability. I'd stopped drawing, stopped building, stopped believing in myself because someone else needed to shine. And all along I told myself that was love. By Sunday evening I found myself back at my computer. I created a new email address, one Isabel didn't know about, and drafted a simple message. "Hi Ryan, this is Ethan from Friday night. You mentioned something about your lake house. If you're serious, I'd love to show you a few ideas I've been working on." I hesitated before hitting send. It felt stupid, naive even, but something inside me whispered, what if this is the start of something real? I hit send, and went to bed with a strange feeling in my chest. Not hope exactly, but something close. Ryan replied within an hour. "Good to hear from you. I meant what I said. Let's grab coffee. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Steel Bean, downtown." I stared at the message, pulse quickening. It was happening. Something was happening. The next afternoon I stood in front of the cafe, heart hammering. I'd worn a button-down I hadn't touched in years and carried a portfolio of my old sketches, printed out that morning at the corner shop. Ryan was already inside, seated by the window, with 2 coffees and a tablet in front of him. "Ethan," he greeted warmly, standing to shake my hand, "I'm glad you reached out." I nodded, still unsure if I was hallucinating this entire thing. We sat, and I showed him my work. He flipped through the pages slowly, nodding. "These are good," he said finally. "Raw, but thoughtful. You've got a natural eye for space, form, function. You ever think about finishing your degree?" "All the time," I admitted, but I convinced myself it was too late, too expensive, too selfish. Ryan leaned back. "Funny. We tell ourselves all kinds of things to keep from chasing what we want. But here's the thing, no one else is going to chase it for you." I smiled, surprised at how deeply that hit me. He then pulled up a file on his tablet. "We're in early stages of a mixed-use project in the West Loop. Mostly residential, but with a commercial strip on the ground floor. I'd love an outside perspective. Someone not already in the architecture machine. Think of it as consultation." My jaw slackened. "You'd trust me with that?" "I'd trust your honesty. And your eye." He slid a flash drive across the table. "Take a look. Send me your thoughts. No pressure." I left that cafe feeling 10 feet tall. That evening, Isabel got home around 7. She looked tired, eyes shadowed from too much screen time and too little sleep. I was at the dining table, reviewing Ryan's plans. She tilted her head. "What's all this?" I closed my laptop slowly. "Just a side project." Her eyes narrowed. "For work?" "Something like that." "Since when do you have projects?" I shrugged. "Guess I've been inspired." She didn't say anything more, but her posture stiffened, like she could already sense something was slipping out of her control, and she had no idea what it was. And for the first time in years, I didn't offer to explain. 3 days passed. I didn't tell Isabel much of anything, and she didn't ask, not directly, but I noticed the shift. She started hovering a little more in the evenings, lingering near the table when I was sketching, pretending to scroll her phone but glancing sideways every few seconds. The woman who used to ignore my hobbies was now deeply suspicious of the idea that I might have ambitions again. And I'll admit, a part of me liked it. Not out of spite, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing her. I wasn't asking for permission to matter. I was simply doing something that gave me life. By Thursday, I had filled a notebook with feedback on the West Loop development project. I had annotated renderings, redrawn structural concepts, and even included 3 new layouts that addressed the airflow and natural lighting challenges I'd spotted in the initial design. I didn't realize how hungry I had been to create until I couldn't stop. That night I emailed the file to Ryan along with a short message. Attached are my initial thoughts. Sorry if I went overboard. It has been a while since I let this part of me out. He responded 20 minutes later. "Overboard? Ethan, these are fantastic. You just solved 2 major design bottlenecks. The team's going to love this. Are you available to meet next Tuesday at our office? Informal, just a discussion." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 1,000 self-doubts screamed at me. "You're not qualified. You don't belong in that room. They'll laugh." But another voice, quieter but firmer, whispered, "You already belong, you just forgot." I typed, "Absolutely. See you Tuesday." The next morning, as I poured my coffee, Isabel walked into the kitchen in her robe. She looked rested, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "So," she began, "what are you working on lately? You've been awfully busy." I sipped my coffee, keeping my tone casual. "Just helping with some design feedback on a small development project." "Design?" she blinked. "Like architecture?" "Yeah, Ryan, your CEO's friend. He saw my sketches and asked for my input." Her jaw tightened. "Ryan?" "Yeah, we ran into each other again. Turns out he's been thinking of renovating a lake house. One thing led to another." She gave a laugh that didn't sound like amusement. "That's random." "Maybe, but it's been good for me." I gave her a half smile. "You know, remembering who I was before IT support and expense spreadsheets." She didn't reply, just stared into her coffee like it might offer answers I refused to give. I didn't elaborate, and that, I think, bothered her most. The following Tuesday, I walked into the towering office building of Keen Ridge Urban Development. 60 stories of glass, steel, and prestige. My palms were sweating, but I kept my chin up. Ryan greeted me in the lobby, his energy relaxed but focused. "They're excited to meet you," he said with a small smile. "Don't downplay your value. Say what you see." The meeting room was bright, with panoramic windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. 5 people sat around the table, 3 architects, a project manager, and a woman I later learned was the firm's senior partner. I was introduced simply as a consultant with fresh insight. They projected the blueprints on the wall, and Ryan asked, "Ethan, would you walk us through your thoughts on the courtyard redesign?" I stood, breath shaky, and launched into my observations. Wind patterns, sunlight shifts, the importance of a central green space to foster communal connection. I showed how their current design missed an opportunity for air circulation, and how rerouting the pedestrian flow could reduce noise pollution by 30%. As I spoke, I forgot to be afraid. I forgot I didn't have a degree. I was just in it, alive. For the first time in years, I felt seen. When the meeting ended, the senior partner approached me directly. "You have a sharp eye," she said. "We could use more of that. Ever considered doing this professionally?" My voice caught in my throat. "I've thought about it. Life happened." She nodded knowingly. "Life happens to all of us. What matters is how we respond when it finally gives us a second chance." She handed me her card. "Let's talk more next month. We have another project breaking ground soon." I got home that evening buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief. Isabel was already home, sitting on the couch in workout gear, pretending to scroll through her phone. "How was your meeting?" she asked, barely hiding the sarcasm in her voice. "It was good," I said simply. She waited, expecting more. I didn't give it. After a moment, she asked, "Is this about the party?" I turned to her, blinking. "What? This whole architecture thing? You're doing this to prove a point because I embarrassed you." I stared at her, stunned. "You think I'm rebuilding my life, just to punish you?" "Well, aren't you?" she snapped, standing now. "You've been cold, secretive, hiding things from me. It's not like you to lie." I laughed softly, not out of joy, but realization. "You never wanted me to have dreams unless they made you look better. That's not fair." "No," I said. "What is not fair is spending nearly a decade lifting someone else up while they mock you in front of a room full of people." She folded her arms, glaring. "So what now? You're going to become some big-shot architect? Reinvent yourself at 35? "Why not?" I said calmly. "Plenty of people have started later than me." She didn't respond, because deep down, she knew it was possible. And that terrified her. I didn't expect her to unravel so quickly. For someone who had spent nearly a decade sculpting her public image like a marble statue, unflinching, polished, in total control, Isabel was beginning to fray around the edges. Not outwardly, not in a way the world could see, but in small cracks that only someone like me, who had stood beside her for years in silence, would notice. She started asking more questions. "What exactly did you talk about with Ryan? When did you start emailing with him? Are you working with his company now?" I answered each question truthfully, but never more than necessary. I had learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than confession, and this silence was power, a new kind I'd never held before. Her tone shifted too, no longer dismissive but brittle. She tried to couch her curiosity and concern. "I just don't want you getting in over your head," she said one evening, leaning against the kitchen island. "Architecture's a serious field, Ethan. People study for years, get licensed. It's not something you can just dabble in." I looked up from my laptop, calm. "I'm not dabbling. I'm consulting." She scoffed, but too quickly. "Is that what Ryan told you?" "That's what his senior partner told me. She asked if I wanted to work on their next project." Isabel blinked, and for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Behind her eyes, I saw it. Not doubt. Fear. She knew the walls of our marriage weren't just shifting. They were crumbling, and she had no idea how to stop it. The following week, Ryan invited me to another meeting, this time with their expanded team. He told me I'd be presenting my courtyard design to a panel of internal architects and developers for potential implementation. My hands shook as I prepared, but there was an electric excitement behind the nerves. This wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a real opportunity. I spent hours refining my renderings, printing full-scale boards, annotating details. I hadn't felt this alive in a decade. When I told Isabel I'd be out for the afternoon, her response was immediate. "Where are you going? Is it another meeting?" I nodded. "Keenridge office. We're reviewing my courtyard concept." She didn't hide her disapproval this time. "They're really letting you lead a presentation." I turned to her slowly. "Yes, they are." A pause. Then she added, "You know, Jordan's been asking questions about Ryan lately. He's wondering if he's getting too chummy with certain people." There it was. A veiled threat. A warning dressed in boardroom language. I raised an eyebrow. "Are you seriously suggesting Ryan's helping me for some hidden agenda?" "I'm just saying," she said, crossing her arms. "You should be careful who you align with. People talk." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. People also notice when someone's finally standing on their own. The meeting was held on the 28th floor, in a sleek, glass-walled room overlooking the city. For once, I didn't feel like an imposter walking into someone else's life. I walked in like I belonged there. Ryan introduced me to the larger team. Some greeted me with curiosity, others with polite indifference. But once I began presenting, once I started talking about light angles, airflow efficiency, the psychological impact of communal green spaces, I had the room. They listened, they took notes, they asked thoughtful questions, and when I finished there was a beat of silence, followed by nods. Real nods. A young designer named Alana even said, "I never thought of using that corner for a water feature, but it makes perfect sense with your orientation." Ryan beamed. "Told you he was good." Later, as the team dispersed, the senior partner approached again. "You've got a rare clarity of spatial intuition," she said. "There are trained architects who don't present this well." "Thank you," I said, almost breathless. "I meant it when I said we should talk again. This could be more than a consultation, Ethan. We have room for growth." Room for growth. God, I had forgotten what it felt like to have room to grow. That night, Isabel was already home when I walked in. She didn't greet me, just sat on the couch, legs crossed, eyes on her tablet, but not really reading. "How'd your little meeting go?" she asked without looking up. I paused at the door, then walked past her, set my bag down. "It went well." "Are they paying you for this yet?" "Not yet, but the conversation's begun." She snapped the tablet shut. "I just don't get it, Ethan. You've been working IT for 8 years, and now suddenly you're a designer again?" I looked at her, really looked, and what I saw wasn't the strong, ambitious woman I once fell for. It was someone who was afraid of losing control, afraid of being surpassed by the man she once treated like a sidekick. "I never stopped being a designer," I said quietly. "I just stopped believing anyone would care what I had to offer." A long pause. Then, softer, she said, "Are you planning to leave me?" It wasn't an accusation. It was a plea. I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet. But for the first time, the choice felt like mine. It started with the little things. Passive-aggressive comments during dinner. A sharp glance when I stayed too long on my laptop. An increasingly frequent, "Who are you texting?" even when my phone was face down on the kitchen counter. But then it escalated. I came home one evening to find Isabel already waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, laptop open in front of her. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes I once found mesmerizing, had gone cold. "Jordan called me into his office today," she said, voice low. I put my bag down, wary. "Okay." "He asked me why my husband is suddenly consulting on a development project with my supervisor." And there it was, the opening move. I didn't flinch. "Did you tell him the truth? That you humiliated me in front of your entire office, and maybe, just maybe, someone saw more in me than you ever bothered to look for?" Her jaw clenched. "You went behind my back, Ethan. You're working with Ryan, my colleague, without telling me. That's not professional. That's sabotage." I laughed under my breath. "You want to talk sabotage, Isabel? Should we start with how you've been undermining me for years? How you've made me the punchline of every story just to boost your ego?" Her expression didn't change. "Jordan thinks Ryan might be overstepping, getting too personal. that this could be a conflict of interest. Because I exist outside of your control, I said. That's what bothers you, not the work, not the project. The fact that I'm doing something without needing your approval. You don't get it, she snapped. This is my career, Ethan, my life. And now people at the company are starting to talk. Good, I said, stepping closer. Let them talk. Maybe they'll finally see the real story behind the woman who climbed the ladder with stilettos and someone else back as the first rung. That hit her. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but then the tears vanished and the steel returned. You think you're something now, huh? She whispered. You think one consultation makes you a man? No, I replied, but realizing I don't need your permission to exist, that might. The next day I received a text from Ryan. Need to talk, not on the phone. Can you meet? I met him at a quiet coffee shop far from both our offices. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. She's filed a complaint, he said without preamble. I sat down hard. What? Claiming I've engaged in an inappropriate relationship with you, her husband. That I'm showing favoritism, trying to undermine her standing at the firm. That's insane. She's smart. She didn't go direct. She's pushing it through HR, talking to people off the record, painting a picture. I buried my face in my hands. God, it won't hold, Ryan said, but it complicates things. Jordan's cautious. He doesn't like mess. I nodded slowly. What can I do? Protect your side. Keep every email, every file. And Ethan? He looked at me with something more than sympathy, respect. This means she's scared. That night, I opened a private cloud folder and backed up every file, every sketch, every exchange between me and the design team. I catalogued timelines, labeled feedback. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened her journal. I didn't mean to violate her privacy, but she kept it in the same place, top drawer, locked with a flimsy clasp I'd fixed years ago. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. At first it was just meetings, campaign updates, notes about clients. Then I found the section titled Leverage, and my blood went cold. There in her handwriting were lines like, keep Ethan busy, encourage IT focus, praise stability, not dreams. If he ever challenges me, paint it as insecurity, not ambition. Ryan is a threat. Charm him, but don't let him get too close. And most chilling of all, if needed, call into question Ryan's judgment. Ethan's involvement can be spun. She had planned for this. Everything. The support, the condescension, the manipulation, the contingency plan in case I ever dared to step out of line. I photographed the pages, and I knew what I had to do. The next morning I handed the images to Ryan in person. He stared at them for a long time. Then quietly he said, "This changes everything." I nodded. I'm not trying to destroy her, but I won't let her destroy me either. I'll handle it, he said. And I believed him. That night Isabel came home late, reeking of wine and tension. She dropped her bag and looked at me like I was a stranger. Was it worth it? She asked. All of this? You just couldn't let me have my moment. I stared at her for a long time. You had a decade of moments. I gave you everything, but you never once clapped when I tried to stand up. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because by then we both knew this wasn't just about ambition, it was war. It didn't take long. Just 1 week after I handed Ryan the photos of Isabel's journal, the tide began to shift. Ryan kept his word. He didn't go nuclear. He didn't even go public. Instead, he played the long game, quiet, deliberate, and devastating. He sent the evidence to Jordan, not with accusations, but with a simple memo. Concerns regarding internal conduct and manipulation of project narratives. Corporate language, subtle and professional. But the subtext was clear. She's been lying, and we can prove it. Jordan didn't react publicly, that wasn't his style. But Isabel noticed the change instantly. The meetings she used to lead were now co-hosted. Emails she once received first were now CC'd. Her opinions, once gospel, started getting noted and shelved. The slide was gentle but unmistakable, like the slow tilt of a boat before it capsizes. At home she became erratic, She alternated between sugary sweetness and sudden explosions. One night she made my favorite dinner from scratch and asked about my project like she cared. The next, she screamed that I was a traitor who had let ambition turn me into a corporate snake. I said nothing, not because I was afraid, but because she wasn't worth the argument anymore. My focus was elsewhere. Ryan's team had asked me to join 2 more meetings. One was on materials sourcing. The other, early-stage conceptualization for a new high-rise in River North. It felt surreal. Me, a former IT guy, now sitting in a room with seasoned developers, sketching on whiteboards, debating steel versus reinforced timber. And when I spoke, people listened. The most unexpected moment came when Alana, the young architect from before, asked me after a session, "So, what firm were you with before this?" I blinked. "I wasn't." She frowned. "You weren't in architecture?" "Dropped out senior year, family stuff." She looked at me like I'd just told her I moonlighted as a ninja. "That's insane. You're good. Like, trained good." I smiled. "I'm training now." Back home, the tension in the apartment had congealed into something toxic and stagnant. Isabel had stopped pretending. Her smiles had vanished. Her questions turned into interrogations. She no longer asked where I was going. She demanded it. "What are you hiding?" she asked one night, standing in the hallway in a tank top and bare feet, blocking the door. I was holding my laptop on my way to the coffee shop downstairs to work. "Nothing," I replied. "I'm just working." "How you don't even tell me who you're meeting anymore?" "Because it's not your business anymore." That stung. She didn't speak again, just stepped aside. But in her eyes I saw it, the final flicker of control slipping through her fingers. Then came the collapse. A Friday morning, Ryan texted, "It's happening, Jordan's calling her in." Later that day, Isabel came home early. I knew instantly. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a trembling line. She closed the door softly like she didn't want to disturb the ghosts. "They're launching an audit," she said, barely above a whisper, "of the Miller account, of everything." I didn't reply. "They say there were inconsistencies, discrepancies in campaign metrics, client satisfaction scores, ROI. But I didn't do anything illegal." I looked up from my notes. "Didn't you?" Her eyes snapped to mine. "I never forged anything. I just reframed the numbers, positioned them better." "You lied," I said simply. "You lied to make yourself look better. You lied to keep me small. And now the lies are crumbling." She dropped to the couch like her legs gave out. "Ryan betrayed me," she whispered. "No," I said, standing. "Ryan gave you more chances than you deserved, so did I." The following Monday, she didn't go to work. She sat at the kitchen table, phone off, eyes vacant. "They suspended me," she muttered, still in her bathrobe. "Pending investigation. HR says they're interviewing people." "I know," I said. She looked up. "You knew?" "Ryan told me." She blinked. "And you didn't tell me?" "You didn't ask." She stood suddenly. "I built that company's brand. I carried campaigns no one else could. I worked nights, weekends. I bled for that place. And you bled everyone around you dry to get there." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that says what words can't. "I don't know who I am without it," she admitted. And for the first time, I believed her. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because I finally understood her power over me was never real. It was a story I agreed to believe, and I had stopped believing. The email came at 6:42 a.m. Subject, formal consulting opportunity, River North project. I stared at it for a full minute before opening the message. "Ethan, as discussed, our team was highly impressed with your insights during the recent design reviews. We'd like to formally invite you to join the River North redevelopment project as a consulting design strategist. This role would involve weekly collaboration with our lead architects, client presentations, and design evaluation sessions. While this isn't a full-time position yet, it comes with a competitive retainer and the potential for future expansion. Please let us know your availability this week for onboarding. Best, Monica Lynn, Senior Partner, Keenridge Urban Development." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. This was it. Not a hypothetical, not a sympathy favor. Not a lifeline thrown out of pity, a real opportunity. Earned. I read the email again, then again, not because I didn't believe it, but because for the first time in years, I wanted to believe it. I replied with trembling fingers, confirming my availability for Wednesday afternoon. When I told Ryan later that day, he simply smiled and said, "Told you. Sometimes it takes someone else to remind you who you really are." That night, I celebrated with a quiet dinner at my favorite ramen spot 2 blocks away. Alone, but not lonely. For the first time in nearly a decade, I wasn't filling a silence. I was enjoying it. I came home to find Isabel sitting on the couch, arms folded, as if she'd been waiting for hours. "Where were you?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "Out." "Celebrating?" I didn't answer. She stood. "I know about the offer. Ryan told Jordan, and Jordan told me." I said nothing. I didn't owe her explanations anymore. She took a step forward. "Ethan, I want to apologize." That caught me off guard. "I was wrong," she continued, "about a lot of things. About how I treated you, about the party, about the years of pushing you aside." I waited. Not because I needed more, but because I needed to see what this apology was built on. Losing my job, it forced me to see how much I took for granted, how I used you, how I never really saw you. I nodded slowly. "That's true." Her eyes welled with tears, and for the first time they didn't look weaponized. "I don't want to lose you," she said. "I'll go to therapy. I'll rebuild with you. I'll support your work now, fully. I'll help however I can. I just... don't let this be the end." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Please, Ethan, you don't have to forgive me today. Just don't walk away yet." And just like that, the decision was mine. I stood in the middle of our apartment, the same apartment that once felt like hers, filled with her books, her furniture, her aesthetic, and realized something profound. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of compromise, of all the little sacrifices I had made, believing that love meant shrinking so someone else could shine. I looked at Isabel, and for the first time I didn't see the woman I fell in love with. I saw someone afraid of being left behind. "I appreciate the apology," I said gently, "but I'm not the same man who let you dictate the terms of our life." "You're stronger," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm finally free." The next morning I packed my essentials. My laptop, my notebooks, my sketches, a handful of clothes. I left the suits she bought me hanging in the closet. She didn't speak as I zipped the duffel shut. At the door she asked one final question. "Is there someone else?" I shook my head. "There's someone else I need to meet again. His name is Ethan Cole, and I think I finally remember who he is." I walked out into the sunlight of a crisp Chicago morning, and for the first time in years the world felt wide open. It didn't take long for the aftershocks to hit. 2 days after I moved out, I got a text from Ryan. "She's been terminated, official today." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask for more. I didn't need details. I already knew the kind of chaos that would follow when Isabel S. mask finally cracked in public, but I didn't expect what happened next. Apparently, as she was being escorted out of the Gray and Baxter offices, she made a scene in the lobby, crying, shouting, accusing the entire firm of conspiring against her. Ryan told me she screamed that she had evidence, that she would take the whole house down. Security had to intervene. By that evening I was getting messages from old friends, former colleagues, even a few of her interns. "What happened to Isabel? Dude, did she really get fired? You okay?" I didn't respond to most of them. What could I say? That after years of quietly supporting a woman who built her empire on image and manipulation, the empire finally crumbled. That justice wasn't always loud, but when it arrived, it was final. A week passed, then another. I signed the contract with Keenridge on a Thursday morning. The same day I moved into a new one-bedroom apartment in Logan Square. Nothing fancy. Exposed brick, old hardwood, a window that looked out over the corner cafe. But it was mine. I bought a second-hand drafting table and spent my evenings working late, sketching new concepts, reviewing project specs, and relearning all the things I'd once thought I had left behind. One night after finalizing a concept layout, I looked up at the clock and realized it was past 2 a.m., and I smiled, because I wasn't just tired, I was fulfilled. Isabel didn't contact me directly, but she left traces. A voice message, clearly after too much wine, where she slurred through apologies, begged me to remember what we had, and promised that we can rebuild from this. I didn't reply. Then a week later, an email. Ethan, I know I don't deserve your kindness. I know I broke something sacred, but please, if you speak to Ryan, tell him I've learned my lesson. I can't get another job. The industry's frozen me out. My reputation is ashes. I don't even know how to start over. You always believed in reinvention. Help me find my way back, please. Isabel. I read it twice. Once as the man I used to be, and once as the man I was becoming, and then I deleted it. By month's end, I was fully onboarded at Keenridge. My courtyard design had been greenlit, and the development team was using it as the centerpiece for a new marketing campaign. The senior partner, Monica, even pulled me aside and asked if I'd be interested in joining their accelerated licensure program, something they were willing to sponsor. You've got raw talent, Ethan, she said, and heart. The rest we can teach. I couldn't speak for a full minute, because in that moment I realized everything I thought I'd lost was still inside me. Dormant, not dead. A few weeks later, I was walking past the Steel Bean Cafe where I first met Ryan, when I saw a familiar figure across the street. Isabel. She looked small, not physically, but something in her posture, in the way her shoulders curled inward, like she was folding in on herself. Our eyes met. She hesitated. Maybe she thought I'd cross over. Maybe she hoped. But I didn't. I just nodded once, calm, clear, and kept walking. Because the past may wave at you from across the street, but that doesn't mean you have to walk toward it. 6 months. That is how long it's been since I walked out of the apartment I once called home, and never looked back. 6 months since I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's expectations. 6 months since I remembered I had a name, a purpose, and a voice. My courtyard design broke ground in late spring. The team brought me in to walk the site, hard hat on, boots caked in Chicago mud, as I pointed to where each tree would go, where the sunlight would fall at noon, where wind would pass through to cool the summer air. I wasn't just imagining anymore, I was building. I'd been promoted from consultant to design lead on a secondary project, and now I wasn't just drawing, I was teaching, coaching interns, being invited to speak on panels. Every time someone introduced me as Ethan Cole, designer and strategist, a quiet pride bloomed in my chest. Not loud, not boastful, but real. Monica's licensure program became a lighthouse in my life, a focused path forward. I studied at night, attended workshops on weekends, and though I was years older than most of the young architects in the room, I never felt behind, because they were learning theory. And I had lived the why. Sometimes I still thought of Isabel, not with anger, just as a reference point, a cautionary tale, proof of what happens when you build your success on someone else's silence. A mutual friend told me she'd moved back to Ohio in with her parents. Her LinkedIn now listed her as a marketing consultant. Translation, unemployed. She hadn't emailed again. And I hadn't looked back. I rented a small cabin by Lake Geneva over the 4th of July weekend. Just me, a few sketchbooks, and the sound of wind in the trees. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise across the water. And I realized something powerful. I felt whole. Not perfect, not finished, but whole. For years I thought love meant staying small to keep someone else comfortable, that support meant silence, that being a good partner meant sacrificing everything, even myself. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. And dreams, real dreams, don't die. They wait, patient, quiet, but always burning. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, if you've ever looked in the mirror and seen someone who used to dream, someone who got buried under bills, expectations, or someone else's ambition, let me tell you this, you're still in there. That version of you, the one who used to sketch or sing or write poetry or imagine building bridges between ideas, they never died. They just got quiet, waiting for permission to speak again. Well, here it is. Permission granted. Start small, start scared, start late if you have to. But start, because it's never too late to reclaim your voice. And the most powerful moment of your life may begin the day you stop asking for permission and start telling your own story.